Good afternoon and welcome to Community Connections. I'm Steve Jewell with Community Giving, and we're glad to have you with us once again for our series on connecting with our local communities. We're excited about today's presentation. We're going to give people just a few minutes to gather, and so if you want to just sit back, we have several people joining us today, and we'll just let them log on. If you're just joining us, again, welcome. I'm Steve Jewell with Community Giving, and we want to welcome you to our series called Community Connections. Today, we have a very, we think, a very interesting and exciting program focusing on the arts. If you're new to this series, we'd like to welcome you. We've been doing this series since we've all been with the stay-at-home orders. We decided that we would go virtual just as a way to stay connected with our communities, as well as provide ongoing education actually for all of us to learn, especially about what some of the needs are in the community, ways for us to stay in touch, and ways where we can be supportive. So we're really glad to have you with us today. If you have questions throughout the program today, there is a Q&A tab down at the bottom, and feel free to just put in your questions there. We will have time at the end for answering those questions, but please, while you're thinking about them, go ahead and put them down there. Also, this will be recorded, and so that will be available at our website at communitygiving.org/COVID-19. We also have a number of webinars available from our previous weeks available there if you happen to have missed one of them. So thanks again for joining us, and I'm going to turn things over to Holly Witt. Holly is the Executive Director of the Alexandria Area Community Foundation, and I'm going to turn things over to Holly. Holly. Holly, we just need you to unmute your, so we can hear you.
How's that? Better? Can you hear me? Okay. All right. So again, welcome to everyone. We're happy to have you with us today on our webinar with a focus on the arts today. As most of you are aware, over the last months, as we've been dealing with COVID, we have started response funds in our communities, all of our foundations, to really help with the relief efforts in our community. But we also know that over the past months, our arts organizations have really suffered right along with us. And they've had lost revenue, due to events and programs and shows, their fundraisers, galleries, all of those things being affected, closed, shut down. And so we know how important the arts are in our communities, to the well-being of our communities and to the economic vitality of our communities as well. And so we decided to dedicate one of our webinars to some arts organizations so that we could hear how they're innovating and how they are adjusting and adapting to the environment that we're in. I just wanted to, before I introduce Nicole, we've got three people who will be presenting today, but I did go on to the Minnesota State Arts Board website. If you go to the website, there's just tons of information as far as how the arts impact our economic vitality in our state. There was something I found really interesting. I just wanted to read it really, really briefly, but it's there's some statistics too on why the arts are important and how important they are to citizens of our state. And I'll just read this little clip here. It says, "The numbers tell us that Minnesotans care about the arts. We care because the arts inspire us and spark our imaginations. We care because the arts improve students' overall academic achievement. We care because the arts are a bridge between different cultures and ethnic heritages. We care because the arts attract millions of visitors to our state and generate income for local economies." So arts are just huge. They're huge in our communities, to our state, and we value the arts organizations, and so that's why we wanted to dedicate this day to hearing from them. So with that, I am going to introduce Nicole Mulder, who's the Executive Director at Theater L'Homme Dieu in Alexandria. And Nicole actually was in the private sector in executive positions for almost 25 years, when in 2016, Nicole's business acumen and her lifelong passion for the arts collided. After serving on the board of directors at Theater L'Homme Dieu, Nicole stepped into the role as executive director. And since coming on as executive director, it's proven to be great for the organization, because under her leadership, the theater's audiences have increased and they've responded positively to the programming. She's very proud to be assembling a phenomenal team of staff and a board of directors. And the fundraising efforts, including events, grants, corporate foundation, and personal charitable giving, have all increased. Just 2 years into her job, Nicole was recognized in the 2018 Impact magazine as one of 11 people featured as someone making a difference in the region. She serves as an officer on the board of directors of the Minnesota Presenters Network and actively advocates for the arts in Minnesota. She's proud to serve her hometown community and enjoys the unique opportunity to combine the theater's rich history with her modern business practices to ensure a sustainable organization. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Nicole, and let you talk about Theater L'Homme Dieu.
Thank you, Holly, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here, and I am thrilled to be on a panel with Dennis and Scott. I think we're going to have a really rich discussion today. To talk about innovation in the arts, when Holly and I first started talking about a month or so ago, a lot of the questions that she brought were, are you doing Zoom events? Are you going to be doing things on live on Facebook, or what are you going to do? And it really just brought this discussion of what innovation in the arts really can be for us. And so I want to talk to you today about Theater L'Homme Dieu and what we've done to transform our summer season, and what we're doing to kind of stay close to our mission with the limits that we have this year. So I really do want to focus on our mission, because I think that's where we can all start. So I'm going to read this to you, or read along with me. Theater L'Homme Dieu produces and presents exceptional live theater, fine arts, and educational programming that celebrates culture and nurtures community, enriching the quality of life throughout Alexandria, the Lakes area, and central Minnesota. So there's our mission. And we are a summertime theater. We are in our 60th year. We have 22 acres of land on the lake on the north end of Lake L'Homme Dieu in Alexandria. So typically we bring in a new show every week, and you can find this information on our website. I won't go into all of it, but a new show comes to us. We buy a show that's already been produced and bring it to our campus and present it for a week. And then we strike it. We start a new one the next day, we bring in a new one the next day, or sometimes the same day, and open that within 2 days and run that again for a week. And then we pepper concerts and other events throughout that. So now that when in March, once we realized that might not be the case, what we did as an organization is take a look at, okay, now we've got to take out our theatrical experiences because we're limited there. And now what can we do? What can we do to stay that second part of our mission statement there? Celebrates culture and nurtures community, enriching the lives and quality throughout Alexandria. Can we go to the next slide, please? So the one thing that we did there was to take a look at ourselves. I call it a pivot process. Let's do an asset review. What can we do to show that, what can we do? What are the assets that we have that we can work with this year? I just realized I forgot to set my timer. So somebody chime in when I am off my time. We are nimble. One of the things that we actually had to do to be nimble is to be very, very honest with our audience, which we recently did, and say, our season is not going to look the same. We're going to have to refund your tickets. We're going to have to, you can put it in your Theater L'Homme Dieu account if you want, but we are not going to look the same. and just be very, very honest. And in doing so, that created that nimbleness that we need to maybe pepper in some programming throughout the year. The other thing that we have is we have seasonal programming, so that affects us this summer. It could very well be, like Holly said, that our entire season could have just been wiped out. It's an entire year of revenue, an entire year of earned revenue. But we're going to try to do some things that keep us relevant in the community. We also have a staffing strategy that makes us very nimble. I am the only full-time staff. We have one more part-time staff throughout the year, and then the rest of our staff is seasonal. So we don't have the payroll that we need to worry about throughout the entire year. Our organization is strong internally. Our board of directors is amazing and supportive and working very, very hard right now. So that allows us to also be nimble. We have access to wide open spaces. I mentioned before, we're mostly in the woods, but we do have 22 acres of land, and we also have lakeshore property right across, adjacent to our property. We have the ability to segment communications, and I want to mention that because I think it's really important. When I talk to our audience, I sometimes segment that. So I might talk to just our season pass holders. I might talk to the entire audience, and I think that's important as we look to what we're going to do this summer. And then we have the presenter strategy. We do not produce shows. So by the time we have a show in, we don't have the cost of producing and bringing in a whole new set and all of the stuff that it takes to produce a show. It's very expensive. So our strategy of being a presenter, which we've done for the last 10 years, is an asset to us this time. We'll go to the next slide, please. That word on the left says attitude. We want to make it clear that we are looking at this summer as an opportunity rather than being held back by restrictions. We are not pushing the envelope. We're seeing opportunities. We're doing things that we've been talking about for years, but just never did it. We are making modifications for all the right reasons. And I can't stress that enough. I feel very good about that. Another couple of attitude checks. We have to be very, very honest right now. Brutally honest. It's not necessarily the time for hope, although we want to look ahead that we're doing shows, and we want to be hopeful with that, but we also want to be very safe. And I always I'm comfortable with business risks, but I'd like to take those risks when they're based on probability. And our probability has been thrown out the window. And what I can also tell you is that business risk is not the same as pandemic risk. So those are all these kinds of attitudes that I think are going to help us move forward and really will allow us to take back the power that we may have lost when somebody started putting restrictions on our programming. So the next question brings us to be, how can we be Theater at L'Homme Dieu this summer? How can we take those assets? Thank you. Take our assets and transform them to be who we are and even something more. We have made a few decisions here. We are going to extend our season into the fall and into the winter months. If necessary, we are going to rent space. We're going to take Theater L'Homme Dieu on the road. We are not a winterized location, so it'll be awfully cold there in the winter, but we do have great partnerships in our community that may allow us to present somewhere else. We are not going to do indoor shows. Now, as of early last week, we heard that this is going to be a long road, and then all of a sudden on Friday, they said you can have some programming. So I don't think we're there yet. I'm just not comfortable with that yet. So again, being really, really honest, I think what we're doing for this summer is we're right on track. And it's not to judge anybody else who's making different decisions. These are, we are going to have to be okay with consistent adaptation. So we're going to not do indoor shows. We're going to do outdoor drive-in performances and boat-in performances and boat-in experiences. Again, we have a place that you can drive right up with your boat. We could have people on land and at sea and have a little band out there. We can even put the band in a boat and bring them to your dock if you want. Community partnership opportunities. We're looking again, we've been approached by some people in our community to say, do you want to bring this show to our location? And we might just do that. Again, if we can agree on what is safe, and if we can agree on what those standards of safety can be, then we are absolutely looking at doing those things. Really important here, we want to be a resource for artists. We have all of those assets. Again, can we safely bring in artists that need a new sizzle reel, that can use our stage? I planned a season without an audience, not knowing that we could have one. Now we can have one with our, innovation with the drive-in experiences and things like that. But we still have a stage that's really, a beautiful location and really conducive to the creation of art. So are there playwrights that need a space that they can come and create? Are there artists that, again, need to cut a new sizzle reel and use our stage and really have a nice sound in there? What can we do to make ourselves available to artists who need work? So that is something that we're focusing on. And then just lastly here, I want to talk about Black Lives Matter and Black, Indigenous, people of color. We are also looking at some of the programming, just to be creative here, that we've had in the past that really allows us to be a voice for people of color. We're looking at doing things, back to Holly's original, via Zoom, via this kind of platform, where we can bring those artists back to us live and continue the talkback that we started last year. We had some really amazing talkbacks last year, and I don't want to talk about how that has such a lasting impact, because that puts that in the past. So bringing it to today and saying, let's continue the conversation. That's something that we can use our organization to do. And remember, building community is an outcome. It's not the task. So what can we do? We're using our platform to go back to that mission and build our outcome. That's the end. I want to yield my time to Dennis and Scott, and then for more Q&A. I think I'm ahead of my schedule here, but I'll turn it back to Carol and see, and I'd love to take your questions at the end.
Thanks so much. That was very interesting to hear. I am Carol Turno, and you will not be seeing me because I'm having a little technological difficulties here. So it's a choice of being able to hear me or see me. And the important thing is hearing these great stories. And I have the pleasure of introducing Dennis Whipple. Dennis is the founder and executive director of Great Theater. In addition to providing great performances for our community, he also does some special trainings for our children and adults. They're called Learning Labs. And this past couple of months, they've done some creative things at their foundation to be able to keep us connected with the arts as well. So with that, I'll leave it to you, Dennis.
Thank you, Carol, and just really honored to be here with Scott and Nicole. I was trying to write down ideas while Nicole was talking. So Scott, I want some good ones from you too. So certainly I'm with Great Theater, and our work, we really have tried to focus during COVID. We are a year-round organization. We transform our community through the power of the arts. We, pre-COVID, we're managing a $1.8 million budget. We have 62,000 plus audience members. I have a staff of 13 full-time, 46 artists that are paid, and 16 paid instructors. Certainly a committed board of directors. We own our own facility, which is where we produce sets and costumes, and we have our Learning Lab space, and then we perform at the most beautiful of historic theaters in downtown St. Cloud, the Paramount Center for the Arts. And so our COVID, where we hit that iceberg, on the 13th, certainly we had to stop programming mid, so certainly a little jealous of our summer programmers that maybe had a little time to adapt, as things are still not unclear for them either. But to end programming with a cast and rehearsal is certainly a very difficult and challenging thing to do. But certainly at Great Theater, I'll share what I have for the answers and how we've been managing this time. Next slide. So at Great, we really wanted to activate our super fans. We put people first, and so we checked in on our relationships with our most loyal patrons. First of all, that was employees, and that's taking care of employees. We have a lot of people that make a living off of their job in the arts, and we're proud of that, and we needed to take care of them because they had to take care of their families. And we need to take care of our board and our patrons and our volunteers. And so we've spent a lot of time right away, creating compassionate and simple messaging. We wanted to keep all staff updated daily, and then that moved into weekly and now bi-weekly. And then also, same as Nicole, we have, a mailing list of about 25,000, but that is segmented, directly to what is the participation and the joy of that individual, whether that's attending a show, being in a show, summer camp. And so we've used communication depending on their level of loyalty. Our board jumped in and made hundreds of phone calls just to check in with our great family of donors. And so it was just that. It was saying, hey, we want to check in. How are you doing? Had really great conversations. People answered their phone like never before. Like, who wanted a phone call before this? Not me, but this was just, and it was very joyful even for the board members just to have that chance to connect. And then just a personal, we have continued thank you letters and cards for every donation. We used to be able to do it in 24 hours of every donation, including New Year's Eve. Someone is scheduled to be there on the 1st and send out cards. That's what we do. And so we've tried to keep that up. But another action step is like surprise and delight. So at Great, we do want to be joyful, and it's okay to be joyful. We had 800 families registered for summer camp, and we had to cancel for the first time in 22 years. And so really, that is difficult on kids and families, parents who want their kids out of the house for a week, and kids who want to explore their creativity. And a big part of our camp is that they get a t-shirt. And so each summer, you just see thousands of these t-shirts with our logo all over town. And so we are going to surprise them. We have designed a 2020 camp t-shirt and a bunch of virtual programming camps. And certainly, again, our most loyal fans, we're going to deliver these t-shirts to their homes and say we miss them. And then we're going to provide pickup times, and we'll even mail them out. So we're going to connect with all those families that would have been at camp and say we miss you and we can't wait to see you in 2021, to keep their loyalty and support and have a little fun. But Carol also asked about generating revenue. And so at Great, you have to ask to receive. And although we were not named essential, we were from the second this happened. Our community turned to us to make masks. Our community turned to us to keep senior volunteers engaged in their homes through Zoom and learning to sew. There's a ton of ways that the work we do is essential. And so we have continued our donor renewals. We did a 24-hour flash fundraiser that raised just under $20,000. We have applied for any and all grants. And we've been researching how to monetize online and virtual programming. So I'm dying to know what Scott's going to do. And my joy is I get to learn from what he does and doesn't work. And we'll try to figure out how we can, charge for tickets or get donors, to monetize the future of virtual programming. And then we have had great success in generating revenue as we canceled shows and camps, asking patrons to donate the cost of their tickets or camp registrations back to the organization. And so since COVID has hit, we've added 387 new donors to our donor base of about 550. And so some of those are a $20 ticket, but some are also a $700 camp, where they had 4 kids registered. And a lot of these are all new donors. So we're working, what a joy it will be to then when we get to try to renew them and build that support. So this has really brought people understanding the importance of the arts, and they have been willing to give the money to help support and guide us through. So our next slide on the activating donors, we've been doing, kind of this idea that donors won't follow hopeless. We have a vision, it changes every day, but on the day that we share it, We host conversations with leadership, and so these are streamed and interactive. Everybody's a donor at Great Theater, whether you're a volunteer or it's an actual gift of cash, you know, and seeking to treat everybody that way. And so we seek to update and answer questions. We're providing some, even similar to Nicole, like we found this really cool murder mystery Zoom active dinner party, you know, and this is a chance for donors to invite, you know, some of their friends over and have a joyful evening that a great actor leads. And so just finding ways to still bring joy and activity even over this most horrible of all things, Zoom. You know, if anything, I have learned that the internet is not where it's at. The joy of in-person is just when it can come back. I don't know if we're going to be able to fill our hall so easily. So next, Carol was asking about the normal, and I just don't think great was ever normal. I don't know about the other ones, but that's not something we are. We are the creative leaders, and we would never go back to normal because we know there is something better. And I think Nicole hit it on it with the work you're doing around the BIPOC, you know, that there is this better, and what an opportunity. And so at Great, we are always planning for 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, and 18 months. But one thing we know for sure is that it will be a smaller art sector and our financials will be smaller. It will not be a $1.8 million budget because this virus will be around and we have to learn how to coexist with it. And so we are letting it go. You know, we thought a season started in September. That's only because we decided it would at some point. That's an old idea. So we're throwing it out the door. The season will start when it's safe to start. You know, and this opportunity and freeing, like Nicole, riffing off, you know, disruption is okay. And the most joyful, what would you love to say no to? So I've said no to a couple things and it's the pandemic's fault. And that feels really good. So next, action, you know, we at Great, we did a Today and Tomorrow team. We were really stuck in, you know, we had to handle 800,000 in ticket givebacks. You know, that's a lot of work on top of dealing with the grief and staff worried about their jobs. And at the same time, the world and all of us are looking for us to what is next, what is coming. And so we broke into 2 teams and we have some of us on both teams, but we have some staff who are really today people and they get it done and they're right there. And we have some staff and board members who are really big dreamers. And so we've broken into two groups, and today's team is slowly, their work is stopping, and tomorrow's team is really leading on dreaming big. And for Great, that's understanding small is the new big, which is a big change for us. On our next one, we, you know, at that final, how can we serve our community and building community? You know, we know that at the core of our work, you know, this making theater in the dark, where this, you know, this group of people takes a breath, you know, it just is an experience that, you know, inspires self-discovery, empathy, and it transforms us. And so the demand is only increasing. Every day that we are not performing or not doing a camp, the demand is increasing. Even those who weren't coming are realizing they were missing out on something too. And what a gift to take this time to consider cultural equity, to consider accessibility, and for Great that it's when our doors open, whom will we gather? Who has not been in that hall before that we have the time to build a relationship with and create art with and create art for is really a joy and hope for the future for us. And our action around that is to take care of yourself. So we don't take, this is my greatest sadness in this, is just this need to be resilient, because we are, as arts leaders, we have to not only deal with the collective grief of loss of our organizations in the way we knew them, and we have to help our audiences deal with that. I can't imagine, you know, if I came to L'Homme Dieu every summer for, you know, all those years, the loss that they are feeling, the same as our summer campers who have been there for 12 years and this was their senior year. And so just as leaders, reminding ourselves those things that we all know about resiliency, that We check in with our people, we practice acceptance, we help our people process emotions, we explore the meaning in the work that we're doing and create rituals, and taking care of ourselves will allow us to take care of our audiences and our community and lead during this time of disruption. So thank you. Certainly available if anyone wants to reach out and cry or complain about how horrible and difficult this is, or celebrate the joy of something that you've been able to do in the arts. I'm always available. Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Well, it's my pleasure to introduce Scott Likens. And Scott is the founder and executive director and artistic director of the Lakes Area Music Festival. This will be their 12th season, obviously different than the other 11. I'm going to read a very small portion of Scott's bio because his list of places he performed I'd be cutting into his time too much. So Scott's career uniquely blends artistic performance as a cellist and pianist with administrative creativity as founding director of the Lakes Area Music Festival. Primarily a cellist, he enjoys a busy schedule performing throughout the Midwest as a member of the South Dakota and Duluth Superior Symphony Orchestras and freelancer in the Twin Cities area. And here's where it goes on to all the other places he performs. Scott received his bachelor and master's degree in cello performance from the Eastman School of Music. As a collaborative pianist, he's performed in recitals and concerts throughout the United States and Europe. And based on his initial success leading the Lakes Area Music Festival, Scott is a graduate of the Catherine Feline Schaus Arts Leadership Program at Eastman, which this certificate program is designed to inspire students with a personal vision, to equip them with the professional skills and experience to allow them to take charge of their musical prospects and to encourage them to provide leadership in the musical culture and marketplace. Scott serves on the board of the Minnesota Citizens for the Arts, and he's been a mentor for arts organizations and participants in the Global Leaders Program. Also, Scott is a Brainerd High School graduate and a member of the Brainerd High School Hall of Fame. So without any further ado, I just want to say how honored we are to be an annual sponsor of the Lakes Area Music Festival. And if you ever have a chance to come up, it's one of the jewels along with our lakes, the Mississippi River, and then the Lakes Area Music Festival. So Scott.
Hello. Thank you for that introduction, Carl. For those of you who don't know about the Lakes Area Music Festival, we are based in my hometown of Brainerd, Minnesota. And our main programming is a 3-week season every August, where we bring about 200 artists from around the country and around the world to come to central Minnesota and collaborate on chamber music, orchestra, opera, and ballet performances, all of which we present free of charge to our audiences in order to make sure that everyone can attend. In addition to that, we have year-long education programs for audiences of all ages and a summer outreach program of about 25 activities, bringing those world-class musicians out into public libraries, shelters, the Crow Wing County Jail, and other places to connect directly with people in our community who aren't able to come and join us within the concert hall. And before I get into talking about how everything that we're dealing with right now on a global scale has impacted our organization, I wanted to step back a little bit and talk about how the arts industry in general has been affected by what's going on. And the Minnesota Council for Nonprofits has studied the effects on the COVID pandemic and that the effects it's had on various industries. And they placed the arts at the very top of the list of industries that have been hit the hardest by this pandemic. And this morning I was on a Zoom call with about 30 leaders of some of the largest cultural institutions in the state. And the word that came up the most in talking about what's going on right now was devastating. So thinking of that, one thing that we, as we talk today about arts organizations, we haven't talked a lot about is the impact on the artists themselves. And those artists, whether it be visual artists or performing artists, That's how arts organizations are able to bring a mission to a community or even have a mission. And so right now, and I'll speak from the perspective of the musical world, but a lot of our musicians are freelance musicians, especially singers who are going from company to company. And those artists are paid per gig. And most of those contracts include a force majeure clause, which essentially says that if the performance can't take place, you don't get paid. And my associate director in Brainerd is an opera singer. He's now hit over $30,000 of lost income this year, with gigs canceled as far out as March of 2021. Another example of this is the Metropolitan Opera, one of the largest cultural institutions in the country. They had singers already in town in New York City paying for their own accommodations, paying for the daily meals and all of that to be in New York. But when concerts were canceled or performances of their operas were canceled, none of them received a paycheck because they're paid only for performances. So those are some things we don't often think about. And on top of that, in thinking of how to maneuver these upcoming months of economic uncertainty as individuals, we have, I guess the government has opened up unemployment to gig workers. However, every musician I've talked to has found it impossible or incredibly time consuming over weeks to take advantage of unemployment benefits. And on top of that, I know many artists who are pursuing career changes, but whether that's a full transition or temporary work to get through, all of those industries that artists would normally turn to aren't hiring right now or aren't open. So it's a very difficult time for artists. And pivoting now to arts organizations, all of our organizations are built on, our mission is based on exposing large groups of people to our artwork, and that can't happen right now. And as a result, a major source of our revenue is ticket sales or in-person donations by those large groups, which is also lost. Specifically right now, a lot of you have probably seen that our governor has made changes to what is allowable right now with a turn of the dial to open up venues for entertainment. The reality of this is that's great for organizations or institutions like museums or galleries, maybe visual art sales or outdoor events. But for a lot of performing arts nonprofits, there's additional concerns that make it still unrealistic to open up, whether that be the limit to 25% capacity or a maximum of 200 people attending a performance, which would make many performances fiscally unrealistic, whether it's the impossibility of social distancing with our artists on stage, whether it be theater or musicians. Specifically for musicians, I'm looking at things down to what is the risk associated with wind or brass players blowing through their instruments versus strings or pianists who could wear masks in rehearsals. And right now, singing is pretty much considered one of the worst activities you could possibly do, as you're inhaling deeply and then exhaling and projecting that out as far as you can. And so really, singing is not something that professional singers are really counting on being able to do again until a vaccine is created and available. On top of all of that, many of us are working with artists who are parts of various unions, which add additional stringent policies on what is possible. Finally, this summer we would have had 200 artists traveling from around the world, and of course that is unrealistic. So we've made drastic changes as a result of that. Looking to the future of the performing arts in particular, I don't believe that there's going to be a time until there's a vaccine where any of the things we're talking about are really safe. And we can take precautions to be as safe as possible for our artists and as safe as possible for our audience. but there is always going to be a risk, and that risk is going to keep artists away, it's going to keep audiences away until we can know for certain that risk is gone. On top of that, current donation levels, I think, at least for our organization, have been fairly positive, but it's hard to count on how that's going to look in the future as we budget for future seasons and make plannings for that. The legacy funding, which I think we all know has transformed the cultural landscape of our state over the last decade, is based entirely on sales tax. And so I know that the regional arts councils, who are pumping that money out into every corner of our state, as well as the state arts board, are all preparing for up to 50% cuts in their budgets and cuts into the amount that they're able to grant out to organizations like ours. And the real reality is that during this time, there are going to be a lot of arts organizations that don't survive. And that is a pessimistic view, but also a real view. And I already know of a couple fairly established organizations that, as of now, it looks like have already closed their doors or will be doing that soon. So in central Minnesota, in Crow Wing County, where we work, the rural county, a recent study just showed that the arts have contributed annually $5.8 million to our county. And so this is an economic and a cultural devastation. But now I'll move to more specifically about the Lake Erie Music Festival, which is a lot more optimistic than everything I just presented about, fortunately. So we do benefit, like Nicole, we benefit from being a summertime organization. And although most every festival that does what we do during the summertime has canceled, we right away have taken advantage of the luxury of time to adjust our summer programming and address the safety, the health safety, and the financial challenges that we can foresee. Right away, we immediately outlined a number of contingency plans for programming, knowing that as we watch how the situation unfolds week after week, things are changing almost daily. Even just yesterday, I found out that our venue for the summer is not going to be open until 2 weeks after we were planning to resume activities. So daily changes, and I think as both Nicole and Dennis have mentioned, being nimble in this time is incredibly important. Right away, we knew that those 200 artists that we had contracted, it was not going to be realistic for us to still have all of them come to Brainerd. And so what we decided to do as an investment and a commitment to our artists and our future partnership with them, we made the decision that for any artists that we had to cancel their contract this year, we paid a fraction of their fee and also promised to re-engage them in 2021 or when we can do so again. As a good faith message to them that we support our artists, but also investing in our future and in our reputation within the music world. So what are we actually going to do this summer, which is the big question. We are still planning to have concerts. We have trimmed down our roster from 200 to about 40 principal artists who we hope will still be able to come to Brainerd to collaborate on just small ensembles of chamber music. And we will be, instead of having live audiences join us in person, we'll be performing all 11 performances that we do this summer online. We've been investing in the broadcast rights and the fees associated with doing that, and partnering with Minnesota Public Radio, while also using our musicians and other partners to hopefully use this year to grow our audience in size and geography before we return to having audiences join us in person. And we hope that this year, by still maintaining music production, we will be able to grow our audience and our reputation nationwide. Through this process, we'll also be generating hours of content that we can use in the future for online programming as well as future marketing. For our education programs, we've moved our annual week-long day camp for kids into a package of digital activities that they can do with their families at home, which we'll be offering with a donation-based admission. We're also introducing a new Lamps Cast, which will be a series of videos and podcast-style audio with musician interviews, with music appreciation lectures, and with interactive presentations by artists and scholars nationwide. Those are all new programs that we haven't done before, but will be a great way of remaining connected with our audience, not just around the music that we're doing on our performances. And we'll have video and written program notes about all of the music that we do perform this summer, as well as informal Q&A discussions with featured musicians every morning that we have a concert over the 2 weeks in August. We'll be using all of those activities to remain connected with our outreach partners and hope that they're able to utilize those digital resources as much as possible. And something that we're also looking at right now, but are not going to be making a decision until July, is adding in some live music events by bringing our music outdoors. It does look right now that that seems to be the safest and a possible way of having live concerts. But again, we're waiting for a few more weeks to determine how many of those and to what capacity we would be able to put those on. Financially, right away, we made adjustments in programming, which allowed us to cut our budget by 30% this season. Also being a mostly summer organization, most all of our grants were already secured for this season. And thankfully, a lot of foundations and our grantors have been flexible with the use of those. Immediately, we held Zoom meetings with a couple dozen of our primary stakeholders and donors, and most of them pledged to double their annual gifts to help get us through this season. And we're in the middle of an annual fund campaign that's going very well this month. Over the course of the summer, as I mentioned at the beginning, we offer our concerts free of charge, and we'll be doing that again. However, we always have and always will be asking for donations at each of those activities, and we'll be continuing to do that even by going online. Finally, a lot of nonprofits and small businesses have taken advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program, the PPP program. We were very excited about this at first, thinking of how it would impact our organization. However, those funds are not available to be used for, those funds are not forgiven for paying contractors. And our artists and their travel and all of that makes up about half of our $600,000 budget. So that was a big disappointment to us. Those only help to compensate staff. However, they just extended the deadline of that to December 31st. So we'll be able to take advantage of that. Looking beyond this season, there is, of course, uncertainty of when we can resume. But as Carl mentioned, we hope that all of the work this year to remain connected with our audience will serve us well, because in 2021, there is a new performing arts center opening up in Brainerd, and we'll be one of the first groups to take advantage of that and take advantage of a larger stage to do some huge celebratory pieces, a larger theater and opera pit, orchestra pit for our operas, and really just hopefully to be a grand celebration and reunion of our artists and audiences. In addition to the COVID pandemic that we've all been wrestling with over the past month, of course, right now we are also in a state of distress in response to the racial injustice with the murder of George Floyd less than 2 weeks ago. As an organization, like many other arts organizations around the country, we made a statement to our artists and to our audience standing against racial injustice, and received a lot of positive support from our followers by making that. It is difficult for us rural, small town organizations, especially like Brainerd, which is primarily white, to know how our organization can address racial disparity and diversity. And that's a conversation that after over a decade, our board started that discussion in February. And we are proud of the fact that our roster is significantly more diverse than those of the classical music industry. However, this summer was going to be the first time we've ever performed a work by a Black composer. So not a history to be proud of with that. We have now adjusted our programming for the summer to be more inclusive of those voices. And also we are continuing to build and foster partnerships with individuals and institutions so that we can listen and learn for how our organization can respond. Last week, I sat in on the webinar with Dr. Michael Osterholm from the University of Minnesota, and he started with a rather grim but enlightening statement, which is that right now we are in the worst pandemic since the flus of 1918. We are in the worst economic collapse since the 1920s. We have the worst riots, race riots since the 1960s, and they're all happening simultaneously right now. In my lifetime and in most of our lifetimes, the arts have never been more important and needed than they are today. And the most reliable way to ensure artists and arts organizations can continue to create and sustain ourselves for the months or years ahead until a vaccine is created is philanthropy. So I want to say thank you to the Community Giving Network for hosting this, and thank all of the participants, as well as Nicole and Dennis for joining all of us this afternoon.
Well, thank you to all of our speakers for sharing such good ideas and such a positive attitude about a difficult scenario facing everyone. We do have a couple of questions that have been chatted in to me or are in the Q&A feature. So we'll start with one. And Nicole, this first one was came up right as you were speaking, so we'll let you start with that. What is the role of your board in some of your day-to-day decision-making and the decisions to be innovative? How engaged has the board been in that process?
Thank you for the question. They are, first of all, they're very engaged. I mean, this is a volunteer board, so everyone has their thing, right? Like, a lot of our people are working on their own businesses and doing that too, but they have been so generous in their time. It has been, there were days where I can call on some board members and just say, I just need help. This is a really negative situation and I just need to be, again, honest and be vulnerable. And I have such support from our board of directors, and I always gush on them and how they allow me to be vulnerable and lean on them for the times that I especially being a lone wolf here in this organization. I'm not a lone wolf. I am the only full-time employee, but I never feel like that because I have such a great support system to lean on. The other thing that I've done, and this might be another question, is, when I talked about earlier about not having the probability to rely on. And so I can go to the board and say, I'm going to give you a survey. This is something we did to make decisions. I wanted their honest opinion and I kept it anonymous, and I wanted them to just give me no hope. Don't bring in hope. I need your honest answer here. Will you buy a ticket today for an event in June? Will you buy a ticket today for an event in July? And those are really important questions that we all need to look at when we try to figure out how are we going to bring an audience in, and what can we afford to bring in? How can we still, again, support our artists and pay them and yet not lose money for our organization? So those are really important decisions that they've been involved in. And then when it really came down to, what kind of attitude can we have? What kind of, everything. We've just been doing more Zoom calls, more regular Zoom calls. And the other thing that I do with them is, again, that sense of community. Some of our board members are on our board because they enjoy the theater, because they enjoy music, because they enjoy each other's company, because they like to be, you know, involved in the arts. And so again, taking that communication and just saying, hey board, we're gonna have a happy hour. Join me for a Zoom happy hour. And those are things that we can do. And again, just bringing that connection and relying on them for that.
Thank you. So this, I think, might be a good question. We're going to start with Dennis, then we'll go to Scott, and we'll see if Nicole wants to add anything at the very end. So this will be our last question, and that is, hindsight being 2020, what's one thing you would wish you had done in 2019 had you known what was ahead in 2020?
Ooh, interesting. You know, Great did a strategic plan that said we're going to double the number of audience we're going to serve in 2020. The city of Wake Park is building a 5,000 seat amphitheater, and we intended to produce on this and believe that there would be the theater. Why is it wasted on only 62,000 when we could serve 120? How can we get theater into every single person's life in our area? And so I think we just were thinking so big, and now that's just changed so much. So I guess I wish that I would have been a little bit smaller in understanding that the impact we can have can be great in smaller ways also. And I had more learning on that.
Thank you, Dennis. Anything from you, Scott, around that?
Yeah, I have two things. First of all, we were using this coming season as a year to build into the grand season we would have in 2021. So we were going to be doing a Wagner opera with almost 100 artists involved and a lot of other large works. So had we known quite a bit ahead of time, we would have just started with chamber music and been going with that from the beginning rather than still kind of adjusting right now. The other thing, a lot of more established, larger organizations have a lot of digital content that they are able to share with their audiences right now. And that's not something that we have from past seasons. We only have some recordings. And even though it's costly to put past recordings onto the internet or over the airwaves, if we at least had those resources, it's something that we could look at to get out to our audience right now. But instead, we don't have any video, and that pretty much limits what we're able to do until we have our season this summer and finally do create some.
Great. Thank you both. I will turn it back over to Carol for our final comments.
Thank you, Sarah. And thank you to Scott, Dennis, and Nicole again. That was very interesting to hear the unique ways that you are developing programs. So I just wanted to give a short recap on what our response funds are looking at like these days. We have raised just under $800,000 altogether in our 10 response funds, and we still have $419,000 left to grant out. Some of that money has been reserved in some of our community foundations for recovery in particular. So when we talk about the need of or the loss of revenue, you know, we all hear that. We also are very sensitive to the fact that with the changes that have occurred in the past couple of weeks with the loss and murder of George Floyd, we see the strength in helping to build more equity and support all people in our communities as well. So those are some of our areas of concentration. For you to learn specifically about the dollar amounts that are available in your community, please contact your executive director, or to apply for a grant, you can do that by going to communitygiving.org/COVID-19. And Steve, I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, thank you very much, Carol and our speakers today. Thanks for your inspiration. Scott, you summed it up so well at the end when you talked about the various, you know, the pandemic, the economic crisis, and now the crisis and the awakening that we all have to do a better job in how we work together as communities and how we respect people, especially the Black community, and what's going on there. Our hearts just go out, and as we've talked about it internally, you know, we have a lot of work to do on ourselves, and so in that light, what we are going to be featuring next week is a webinar, and with a topic it's called Infusing Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in Our Work as Nonprofits and also in our communities. It's a chance for us to reflect as internally as organizations about what we need to do, and so we hope you can join us. We think this is going to be a pretty powerful webinar, as well as hopefully offer all of us some tips of just, again, how we can do better. And again, as Scott summarized, never ever have the arts been more important to inspire us, to pull us together. We know there's great examples of how you've done this over the years. And so I just really want to thank you for being a part of this webinar series. If anybody has any thoughts, comments, feedback, please email us at info@communitygiving.org. We welcome the feedback, and it helps us as we plan these events. And you can visit our website to find other very pertinent and topics that hopefully are useful to you, past webinars that are recorded. So thank you so much again to our panelists, to all of our speakers. Thank you as nonprofits for the great work you're doing in our communities today. And we hope you can come back and join us next week for our very important topic on infusing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our work. Thanks so much. Take care.